studios in New York City. This is Charlie Rose.
François Gilot and Pablo Picasso met in Paris in 1943 during the Nazi occupation of France. He was 61, she was 21. They were together then for 10 years before she left him, taking their 2 children with her. Gilot wrote in her 1964 memoir, Life with Picasso, that a relationship with the great artist was a catastrophe I didn't want to avoid. Their life and their work is the subject of a new exhibition at the Gagosian Gallery in New York. It is called Picasso and François Gilot, Paris, Belarus, 1943 to 1953. Joining me now, curator and Picasso biographer John Richardson and the artist herself, François Gilot. I am pleased to have both of them together at this table for the first time. Is the first time your paintings with Picasso's have been seen together?
Yes, that's the first exhibition we have ever had together.
That's
so
amazing.
It's never too late, you see.
Never too late, that's right. Never too late. So how did it happen?
It happened on account of John Richardson, who had the idea.
Yeah. This is part of a series of things you have done with the Gagosian looking at Picasso.
Yes, but this one was different because previously it was the mistress of the period who was involved. And with Françoise, it was a whole different thing because Françoise is a painter in her own right. And this is what I wanted to establish. And people always thought, oh, well, she was a painter in her own right, but she was very much under the sort of the umbrella of Picasso. Not at all. She never painted like Picasso. Picasso took, I think, rather more from him than Picasso took from her, rather more
than she took
from him. And this is what I wanted to show in this show, that it was unlike the others. It wasn't just concentrated on the personality of the girl in question. This was really to do with the great revolutions that took place in his work at Valoris. I mean, that he revolutionized ceramics. I mean, ceramics has never been the same since Picasso.
He took it in a new place.
He took it in a totally new place, and he also got lithography, which was a rather boring medium and used because you could make so many impressions from it. It wasn't like engraving; you couldn't make that many. And he took that to new heights and broke all the rules and created in his own work, I think, one of the most important parts of his late work. And then there was the sculpture, which he did, when he was with Françoise, which was a whole new thing of, he had these sort of iron dumps of old bits of iron, which he would bring back and turn into sculpture. And these 3 achievements, and the fact that he did this with Françoise, and that Françoise was not influenced by him, that he was in a way more open to influence than she was, made this into an absolutely fascinating show.
When was the moment you met Picasso?
I was with a friend of mine who was very beautiful, called Genevieve, and with the actor Alain Cuny, who at that time was playing the part of Macbeth in the Shakespeare play at the theater of the Montparnasse. And he had invited us to dinner at the Catalan, that restaurant. And then during the dinner, Picasso arrived along with Dora Maar and the Vicomtesse de Noailles.
Dora Maar being the woman in his life at that moment.
Yes. And so, but he could not keep his eyes away from our table. I could see that.
Doesn't surprise you, does it, John?
Not in the least, no.
And then he found that on his table he had a bunch of cherries in a bowl. So it was a good excuse for him to get up. And
offer you some cherries.
But he knew Alain Cuny, so he said to Alain Cuny, will you introduce me to your friends? And Alain Cuny said, speaking of my friend Genevieve, this is a beautiful one, and about me, she's the intelligent one.
But also the bowl of cherries represented you in some
and
of the still
how
lifes,
many times after that, you know how many times it appeared in his still lifes of the time, and also usually there was the still life, and there was 2 or 3 glasses of water, and those 2 or 3 glasses of water was to remind all of us of the meeting of that meeting at that restaurant.
Oh, and how long before you 2 were together?
since I was the intelligent one, I had the good idea to give him an invitation for a little exhibition that was having with my friend in Paris. And so he went there without saying anything one morning, and he left a little note to me saying that he thought I did draw very well and that I could come to his studio one morning. So about...
The rest is history.
The rest is history.
So about 2 weeks later, we allowed a little time to elapse, and then 2 weeks later we came there, and when Sabartès saw those two faces, he didn't like it at all, because Sabartès was trying to keep things in order, you know.
Yeah.
So he thought that didn't smell good at all. But at that time, to begin with, I saw Picasso once in a while.
You didn't move in with him, did you, for a long time?
No, I moved in with him in 1946.
3 years later?
Yes. Oh, but you know, it started like a friendship. Well, on Picasso's side, he was always trying to go further if he could, but I was not quite persuaded that it was a good idea.
Because of age or because of what?
No, not age, because, you know, he was 40 years older than myself, but he was so bright, so marvelous, and such a great artist, etc. He exuded life, you know, I mean. Yeah. And also his attitude for us, for people of my generation, his attitude during the war was exemplary. Because after all, he never took his passport from Franco, so he was you know, he was like having no passport. He was Spanish, he was not French. So he was really in great danger all the time, and the people like from the French Prefecture de Police, like Monsieur Dubois and Maurice Torevska, was protected by a network of people.
Yes.
He was more terrified of the Spaniards, wasn't he, of the Francoists, right, who were kidnapping people and taking them back to Spain and torturing them, than he was of the Germans. Mm. I mean, the Spaniards were...
About Picasso, it's strange that, of course, he was one of the painters that had been, you know, named decadent and all that. But
decadent.
But Hitler was not as much against him as was Franco, because of the famous drawings of Monteres and of Franco. So frankly, it was, you know, because people say, he did not do the resistance. Well, what would have been the good of Picasso with a gun, you know? It was ridiculous. The fact that he was there, that he did not go away from Paris at that time, was meaningful. His presence said something. Yes, said something.
It's a symbol. Yeah.
Same thing as Matisse, who stayed also in the south of France. They did not want to move. They said, we don't want to abandon that country in the bad hours, you know? So that's what we felt.
But what was so amazing was that Picasso was, let's face it, the icon of anti-fascism, and therefore put himself in enormous risk by staying on. And Picasso was someone who had enormous amount of courage in the studio, but didn't have that much courage out in the street. I mean, he was scared of the gendarmes, he was scared, you know, he didn't like the police or authority in any form. And so to have put himself in this position was an act of amazing courage.
That's what I think.
Fair enough. So, you stayed there until after the war, and then went to Vallauris.
No, but so little by little the relationship became more personal, but not at all right away, about a year after I had met him or something like that. And then I saw him also, because also he always had that strange temperament, you know, one day one way, the other day. So I went to see him whenever I felt like it, but there were times when I did not go, because I wanted to stay a bit at a certain distance, let's say.
Yeah. Françoise always called the shots.
Is that
Picasso
right?
didn't, yes. She won't admit this, possibly, but she was the one who called the shots.
The only one.
The only one who called
the shots. Yeah.
Well, simply it was also, but no, I think that also for the other women who had some misfortunes with Pablo, they were entirely in his power, where I was never in his power, because even economically, you know, my family was not of the poorest, and I went through studies and all that. I was not unable to take care of myself.
You were an independent force.
Yes, and I always knew that. So Picasso should have known that because I had told him, it's not exactly as you think, because many people, fall apart if you are not holding them like puppets, but I don't have threads and I don't fall apart. But he could not believe that, So he had to experience.
Yeah. The other thing that amazes me about him and you have shared this, for him, art was everything. That was his drive, his passion to paint. Everything would suffer except for his art.
Yes. That's true. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, the intensity of the art for him.
Yes, exactly. But also he was always making experiments using people as little molecules,
As little molecules, people.
Yes, so he used people because he always wanted to know how somebody. He was very interested to know how, in such a circumstance, somebody would react. He was planning to say, if I plan, he will do this or that. Will he really do it, etc.
And then, why did you leave?
I left in September. People say I left at the beginning of that year. It's not exact because I went to Paris because I was making stage set for Janine Chara, but we were still together. So finally I left in September of 1953.
Because?
Because I thought the time of that marvel, because it had something absolutely marvelous, but we had to will it together, and when we had become distinct, and I think. And then also I did not quite like the idea that the children would be brought up as badly as Paul, who was a quite intelligent guy and who could never do anything because his father never let him do anything. So
it's hard to be Picasso's son.
Yes, also because he had rather old-fashioned ideas of being a father, didn't he? I mean, he wasn't an easygoing father by any manner of means. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was very dictatorial with his children, and and there were certain times, I don't know, I remember him. Everybody had to sit silently before any journey was made and sit in absolute silence and then sort of...
that was a remain of Olga, because Russian people always do... That's a funny thing. Russian people always do that. Before Russian people go on a trip, they have to sit around a table and have 1 minute of silence. So we had still to do that. And even though he detested Olga, he would still do that because he was very superstitious. So if there was any superstition you could use to not have the bad things happen, that was what he would do.
But he got superstitions from Dora, he got superstitions from Olga, he collected superstitions. And then he could hardly move because of superstitions sometimes. I mean, there were so many things which had to be done or thought of, or the children had to shut up, or whatever it was before
or the umbrella could not be open inside a room, or I don't know what.
Here's one of the things that he said that I admire a lot, because I believe this 150%. Quote, everybody has the same energy potential. The average person wastes his in a dozen little ways. I bring mine to bear on one thing only, my paintings, and everything else is sacrificed to it, myself included.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good quotation, and it's true.
Yeah.
And also, he had another story apropos of that, which was a story pertaining to Cézanne. Cézanne apparently, went on the motif, with a little cart with a horse, and many times would go with a fellow painter to go at Mont Saint-Victoire or something like that. And one day, knock, 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 he goes to a friend of house, and the maid comes out and says, well, monsieur is not here, he went hunting. Yes. So he said, oh, I thought it was a painter, and never saw him again.
I thought he was a painter, but clearly if he's gone hunting, he's no longer a painter.
Yes.
That's a great
story. For example, Pablo, who did not drive his car himself, also said, a painter should be too poor to have a car or rich enough to have a chauffeur.
Because he had this thing that driving was very bad for an artist's hands.
No, the wrist.
Oh, it's the wrists.
It's a wrist.
Because he was furious with Braque. Braque loved to drive and drive he was a very good driver and drove very fast. But I mean, Picasso was just sort of in bed again. Don't drive, you're going to ruin your hands.
Your wrist, your wrist.
Your wrist turn, yes. Oh, wow. See, I have a theory about all great artists, I mean, in a variety of disciplines, care so much about what it is, every aspect. Whether, if it's an athlete, the way their body works. If it's a painter, the way their hands work.
You know, you paint with a brush, but you paint with your body.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, how were you different from him? You, or did you become in some ways one?
No, I think that what is obvious in this beautiful exhibition is that there was a dialogue.
Ah, that's the word I'm looking for.
And
there was a dialogue.
That's what
They
John
didn't
Richardson.
So there was a dialogue about painting, about everything.
And you know, by definition,
I meant by one,
a
John,
dialogue is not a monologue.
No,
so,
by
definition. So if you don't have somebody with whom you can exchange ideas or even disagree, then there is no dialogue.
Right.
I think that he liked to have that either with other painters or with poets.
Right.
And he had that with Apollinaire, he had that with Georges Braque at the time of Cubism.
Yes.
And with me, in a sense, he had that type of dialogue. Because I was not...
About painting.
Or anything else also, because I was not what you call béni oui. We say that in French, béni oui oui means you always say yes, yes, yes. No, of course I had a tendency to say no. Because once I remember he was not very pleased with Claude and he said, you are the son of the woman who always says no.
That's great. Had you heard that before?
No, I hadn't. No, I haven't heard that.
He's the son of the woman who always says no.
Yeah, but it was not true. I was very often saying yes, but once in a while I said no.
When you told him you were leaving,
he
said what?
He said, no one leaves a man like me.
No one leaves a man like me.
Yeah, so I said, wait and see.
Wait and see.
I think he was completely bewildered by this. This has never happened to him
Look at the
before.
way she is. Wait and see.
Yes.
No, because I have also myself a sense of humor, you know. And
yeah, right. Yes.
I thought, for example, if he had thought twice, he was so intelligent. Why did he say that to me? That was really... For sure,
for a smart man, he totally misjudged you.
Yeah, because if he said that, I was about to do it, you know, otherwise I would not have done it, maybe. So I have a very bad temper too, which I did not show for quite a while, but I am a person with a very bad temper. Yeah. And so when he said, nobody leaves a man like me, I said, well...
But Françoise is the one survivor, I mean, of the women in Picasso's life. Yeah. And she's survived triumphantly.
Yes.
But all the others came to grief in one way or another.
And she had a long and happy life with Jonas Salk.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, but what I think is that nevertheless the relationship between Picasso and myself on the whole was not negative. It was extremely positive, with negative aspects like in any relationship, you know, but I think that with him, he did not destroy, you see, in a sense, because he had a very sadistic side to him, but I would say that with me, he was a little bit also bewildered by my kind of independence, and so he did not try to destroy me. I think he was worse with many other women. So,
much worse. That's John's point.
Don't you think?
Yes.
So I think, in a sense, I think he never wanted to destroy me. And so that's why maybe I am still there. And also I have something. When I said that recently to Claude, he said, "Oh, of course, he always exaggerated." So because
Claude, your son.
one day, when I was really about to leave, Picasso told me, you know, you are complaining about the 10 years you spent with me, but I will give them to you back at the end of your life. And now that I'm 90, I think, isn't that bizarre? Because nobody lives that long in my family, you know? Yeah. So I think probably, I believe that he gave me much more positive than negative on the whole.
But I think you gave him so much because it's perfectly clear from having worked on this show that this is a great, great phase in Picasso's life, and that it's very positive, and he does do
but
these
three... But it was love on both sides,
yes.
You know, you have to admit it was love. It was a big passion on both sides. So.
And it's innovative. I mean, it's new stuff. I mean, and I think that's what Françoise gave him, was this, you know, it's a hugely positive time, and this is what I wanted to prove in the show and show how enormously important, enormously positive that period is.
All right, let's take a look at some things and show that through the paintings by Picasso.
Well, this is a portrait of me in 1946. 1946.
Yeah, exactly.
Made in the south of France, when we lived in that tiny house of that printer was called Monsieur Faure, and as you see, I have my hair, which was rather reddish at that time, and rather full, and a green dress, and that
was Matisse, wasn't it? The green dress. He saw you.
Because we had gone together to see Matisse previously.
Yes.
And when Matisse had pretended that when Pablo came with me the first time, Matisse pretended that he thought that Picasso had brought me so that he could do my portrait. You should have seen Picasso's face. So Matisse, who had a great sense of humor, said to Picasso, "Oh, how kind of you to bring me that young painter, but I will make her portrait." Said Picasso, we didn't want to go in flames right away. So, and how would you do that portrait? Oh, I would do it with leaf green and a blue that is paler. That's what I would do. And after that, when we came back toward the house, Picasso said to me, "What nerve! What nerve! He's not going to make your portrait." You know? And that's after that Picasso started to make portraits of me.
Well, she's the famous Femme Fleur series, which is absolutely beautiful, where she is visualized as a flower.
And it is with the stem is all pale blue, and the head is like a little sun with green leaves. You know, I had abundant hair at that time, as you can see.
Yes. Okay, the next one is Winter Landscape. This is 1950.
Yes.
Tell me about this.
First of all, that painting is extremely important because at first sight, it is kind of desolate. It's winter. The trees in front, the two trees in front, seem, you know, without leaves, without like skeletons, and the one behind, there is a palm tree next to a square house, and the palm tree, in my mind, stands for Matisse, and his house called Le Rêve, the Dream, which he had in Vence, and then the big tree, which is very tormented to the right, is Picasso himself. And then to the left, there is a tree a bit smaller and a bit whitish, you know, as if it was anemic. That's for me.
You were anything but anemic.
And maybe also I pretended to be a bit more anemic than I was, because when you were close to Picasso, you must show yourself very small. It's more prudent.
More prudent.
Yes. So, yes.
You seem to have understood him very well.
But what I discovered about this painting, which excited me, was it kept on reminding me of something. And suddenly I realized when I was working on the show, of course, the El Greco in the Met.
Yeah.
And so I went up the Madison Avenue and looked at it, and clearly Picasso knew it. So I did a bit of research. And indeed, the great El Greco landscape of Toledo in the Met was in Paris, belonging to a dealer from 1900 to 1910, when Picasso was living in Paris and would have seen it. And the colour, the composition, the sort of feeling is straight out of El Greco. And we know at the time that he'd done another version of El Greco, two other versions of El Greco, a self-portrait of El Greco as a painter. And so he must have also had a book. Do you remember what book he had on El Greco? He must have had a book around at the time.
Yeah, and also, you know, even when he was quite young, in Barcelona, before he ever came to Paris, his friends who were older than himself from El Quatre Gats. One of them was either an art critic or and was the first one to buy some El Greco and bring them to Barcelona. So even in Barcelona, he had seen some magnificent El Greco. So he was interested and knew El Greco much before other people. So of course, when he saw it later in France, he must have been intrigued.
Because El Greco had been forgotten as a painter in Spain. I mean, nobody ever, the name was known to nobody until the Spanish painters suddenly started taking him up at the end of the 19th century and collecting him and showing him and going through the streets with El Grecos, waving in the air, showing what a great painter he was. And Picasso picked up on that.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next one we will take a look at, this is called Woman Drawing. This is 1951.
Well, that's a portrait of me holding a pencil, but a strange pencil because I don't know why it is round in the middle. And I asked Pablo to explain why it had a thread also. I don't know. But anyway, it's supposed to be myself in the process of drawing.
This is important because it's the only painting, really, in which Picasso accepts the fact that she is a fellow painter.
Yes.
And usually she's perceived as a mother and playing around on the floor with the children and so on. But here she is seen as a serious painter. And that is an enormous, in a way, thing for him to agree. This is a great admittance of him to have made because he didn't like to see the women in his life as being rivals or doing something that he felt he was better at than anybody else.
He was the king of, and here he's acknowledging that she is a talented artist.
I think that at the beginning, he kind of liked it. It is when I had the show at the Louise Léry's gallery in '52, I understood that was a bit too much. So I was allowed to paint, but not to become known, I think.
Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does, yes. He didn't want any rivalry. Yeah. Least of all from the woman in his life.
Yeah. All right, the next one, take a look at the next one. This is 1952, Naked Woman Twisting Her Hair.
Ah, such a wonderful painting, this. Françoise, you had never seen this painting before,
no, I never did.
Until when? Until you brought it to her attention.
Yes. And she said, because he showed her everything, but he must have hidden this one. Because it's in a way the most powerful of all of them. It's a fantastic painting. Yeah. And I always...
And the torsion of the hair, etc., it has something you see with look at the hands, etc. So,
yes.
So I think it was maybe telling a bit too much. So he never showed it to me. That's all I can say.
There's also an element in it of, I can't help, I mean, forgive me if I'm saying, I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair. I mean, that's what it's all about, I think.
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps?
Yeah, well, it's...
I don't know when South Pacific, what the date of South Pacific was, whether that song had...
I think exactly. It's evident that you see a woman alone, and she's... removing the water from her hair.
Okay.
She doesn't...
So the next one is view of three sculptures here. Talk about this, John.
Well, two of them are about Françoise.
Yes.
I mean, one is Françoise pregnant, which she doesn't like at all, and she made her disillusionment very obvious to him, and so his reaction was to chop her feet off. She hasn't got any feet in that. And actually, it's a marvellous image of a pregnant woman, and the pregnancy is a broken pot. He took a sort of broken terracotta vessel, stuck it onto the plaster.
And also, I think he thought that with the children, I would never dare to leave him.
Yes, I'm sure.
Once the children were born, you wouldn't dare leave.
And so that's why he wanted a third one. I said, no. No.
He wanted a third child
to make sure I would not leave him.
And then the one on the right, the one made of sort of little bits of wood, which he'd found lying around, and that is again Françoise hoisting Paloma, her daughter, above her head. Yeah. And that's an absolutely gorgeous one.
Wow, look at that.
And so with such a sense of humor, you see.
And the one in the middle is it always seems to me all about war. And the Korean War was going on, and Picasso was painting, he did two paintings which involved his hatred, his pacifist hatred of war. And I think this one is the most desolate and unforgettable images of war.
All right, take a look at the next one, Francois.
They are of the same type as the woman flower.
Yeah. Is this the woman flower?
It is a woman flower, yeah.
Yeah, more or less, but it's not the first one.
Mm-hmm. But what do they say?
What do they say?
What do they say?
Well, the one in the center was a door, you know, in the house of some Argentinian friend of his, and he never sent it back. He kept that door at his studio.
Also,
I like the one. I like the one with the green and blue one.
Yes. To the left.
To the left.
Yes.
Which has a very tiny head.
Yeah. Tiny.
The head is almost invisible, but it's there, and to kind of the contrary of the fact that I was more or less an intellectual, so he gave me that small head.
It also is a little bit says thank you Matisse, because the concept of the
blue and
the blue and the green was Matisse's.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
it really and it's very much inspired by what Matisse said he wanted to do.
Okay, the next one is this double row of lithographs.
Yes. So the lithograph started with the color lithograph, which is
yes.
up and to the left, which were with about 5 colors. So that means 5 different stones. And he was not extremely satisfied of it in color. And so he started working on each of the different stones and lead them to something else. So that's why... And it's very interesting. I think that John Richardson got that collection from Claude, who has all the different states, even though some of them were not printed as a lithograph.
A lot of these, a lot of what we'll see at this exhibition at the Gagosian are works of art held by the family.
Yes, all of those are held by the family. But a lot of them come from Claude, from Francois's son Claude, right. And also from Bernard Picasso, Picasso's legitimate grandson.
Right. All right. I should say this. Some say, and you would know, that she sort of revived his interest in lithograph.
Well, yes, I think she certainly did. Francois,
but I am not. You have to be fair. It is Fernand Mourlot.
Yes.
Who had that workshop of lithography, who came in 1945. He went to see 3 artists. He went to see Pablo Picasso first, and then he went to see Matisse in the south of France, and then he went to see Georges Braque.
Yeah. And Chagall he went to see. Didn't he go and see Chagall?
Yeah, perhaps, but that was the first 3. And they started to work with a little bit of rivalry and a great deal of emulation, if you like to call it that way. So I was interested and I followed him to the workshop. So I saw that from the beginning, but I was not the catalyst. The catalyst was Monsieur Mourlot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next one. This is a case of ceramics. And John, you've already said that it was in this period that he became very creative about ceramics.
Well, this all goes back to this character who came into Picasso's life and Francois's life called Michel Sima, who was this refugee from he'd been in the concentration camps. And he came there and Picasso and Francois saw him as a kind of harlequin, you know, a sort of magical figure who got things done. And he was the one who came up with the Chateau Grimaldi, where he painted the great Antipolis series. He was the one who came up with the pottery, the first pottery. He masterminded all these changes. He's never been given credit for it. Nobody seems to remember who he was. I've written a bit about him because I think he was so important and so overlooked. And he was the one who put Picasso in touch with the Ramiers, who produced all this pottery for him. Francois was very
yes,
important.
there was also, because at the beginning, Picasso took forms, shapes that existed there and decorated them. But soon enough, he was interested in making the forms himself, and that's where you see those small statues which look like tanagras, which are absolutely beautiful, and where he had the potter turn. We call turn like little amphoras for him of different sizes and gabarit, and he let it dry for a day or a day and a half, and when they are still extremely supple because they are still full of water, he would take them with the greatest care with his hands, you know, and fold them like this or fold them like that, and like this, and made a statue of it, which was just an amphora. And then after that, many times he painted them, and then they went to the kiln. But I find those absolutely incredibly stunning. The inventiveness, and also I saw them being made, the sensitivity of his hand working on that fresh material, you know, which was so ductile. That was fantastic.
And they're sculptures rather than ceramics. I mean, they stand...
All right, taking a look at the next one. This was 1950. This was 1950.
Yes.
It says something about his relationship with family.
Yes. I mean, Claude is in a little car.
Yeah.
And the figure of Claude, you see, even though it's the car is horizontal, of course, but the figure of Claude is kind of ascending, whereas the figure of Paloma is descending toward the little train. So I think the forces at play in that painting, the build-up of the painting is very, very interesting. There is also an armchair, empty. You know, it's interesting, the empty armchair, because at the time of Dora Maar, the armchair was like a gel into which Dora Maar had to be inserted, and there the children can play because the armchair is empty.
Yeah. It was an electric chair. It was lethal, the chair, in some of his paintings. But in others, it's sort of caressing and comfortable and loving, and it's wrapping its arms around you. Yeah. I mean, he varied. What I love about this painting, too, are the rhymes Picasso makes between the wheels of Claude's motor car and the tile work on the floor, which is those rhymes. So it's exactly the same motif serves as the wheels of the car and also as the tiles on the floor, and he plays a lot around with that.
And even the face of the little girl is also a circle, you see. Yeah. So yes, it's true. The repetition of shapes,
and which rhyme, these rhyming shapes and so on, and the characterization of the children is so fascinating because he's tough on Paloma, isn't he? Very often.
Always, I was always wondering why he made her into a monster each time. I don't know if he was taking revenge on her from me. I don't know.
This one is... Who is the dog?
She's got a good line on that one.
The dog was a boxer called Jan, and I was always playing with the dog. But, you know, when you start at the beginning, a few years earlier, being the woman flower, and you begin to be a monster of a woman playing with a defenseless poor little dog.
And you're the aggressor, yes.
Yes, of course.
But I like what you said. I said, it's Picasso. I said to Françoise once, Picasso's presumably the dog in this. And she said, no, Picasso saw himself not as dog, but as God.
So you would look at it at first glance, you would think that, but...
Isn't she terrible?
Yes.
And plus, you know, since Picasso used to have leitmotif colors for the women, so my leitmotif color was green and blue. So it's obviously about me that it's going on, and the violence of the red rug is something terrible. I've fallen from my high seat.
This was in 1953, so this is near the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It brought the end about, I suppose.
All right, there's one more here. This is a group of paintings of
Paloma.
Paloma, and tell me about this, John.
Well, Paloma...
Well, go ahead.
They're Paloma, but Paloma seen in a happier light than the previous one. I mean, she's not groveling on the floor and growling. I mean, here she looks like a sort of happy kid. And there are a whole series of these which are absolutely gorgeous. And
okay, so this is the first painting we see of yours. This is 1943.
Yes.
Where did you paint this? In Paris?
I painted that, yes, I painted that. It was in my parents' home, because you see it was from the window of a window looking south toward the garden and to other houses. It was in Neuilly, when we had a house which was fairly large with a garden, and the other houses there too.
No, your parents wanted you to be a lawyer.
My father thought I had to study the law. He said because I was very imbued with philosophy and etc. So he said, what you need are lead shoes, the shoes of lead to put you down a bit because you are a little bit too much. So he wanted...
He was right.
He was right, yeah. But parents are always wrong to be right.
Yes, indeed. You're right. Okay, let's take a look. So, who influenced you at that point? I mean, who? Before we look at this one,
Well, you could see the other. There are two others which are of fish.
Yeah.
So also fish that are dead. On a plate and with a knife, etc. So it was a way to interpret the theme of the fish is the Christ, if you like, and the terrible moment of the occupation, etc. And as a matter of fact, I was probably influenced by the painting, the still lifes of Georges Braque I had seen at the Salon d'Automne, that in 42 or 41, I can't remember. But I was quite under the influence of Georges Braque at that time. I liked what he did. I loved those still lifes, which were of everyday life, the toilet with the little objects of the toilet, etc., which were so innocuous in terms of what is figured that and what it means in terms of the sadness of everyday life at that period, etc. The French people could understand it. And for example, each time there was, during the occupation of Paris, each time there would be an exhibition, there would come the day before a group of German, not in uniform, 8 or 10, with that man Heller or Hall, I can't remember his name. Anyway, would come and look at an exhibition and say this no, this yes, this no.
Censorship.
Yes, absolutely. And for example, once I was at the Galerie Charpentier in 42, for example, and I was there the day before the opening because I knew the people of the gallery, and those German people came, and all the Picasso they sat down, all the Matisse they sat down, and there were some Van Gogh, they left them up, etc., etc. So it was a choice that they made before an exhibition. So the painters were some painters were really not to be seen. But at that time, when you knew people from the galleries, you just would stay in a gallery like until 6 p.m. And then the people of the gallery would show you all the forbidden paintings, Jeanne Buchet at that time. For example, with her, I could see Max Ernst after 6 in the evening. She showed me the Max Ernst, and then Or, Kandinsky, etc. So it was very interesting because everything was doing the things that you could not do, and kind of trying to live normally as if because intellectual life was not free.
Picasso's dealer was in hiding because he was Jewish, Kahnweiler. And he spent the whole war in hiding.
Yes.
And with his wife. And his place was taken by his partner, Zet Leris. But they had a very tough time.
And he had the luck that his wife was from I don't know what country in France, so they were known there. Otherwise, most people would try to hide, were denounced by the people of the village.
The people who, when they tried to hide, the people in the village would denounce them.
Oh, yes.
And give them up. Wow.
the number of anonymous letters that were written at that time is
Appalling, yes. Oh. Or you get a little cash might save you for a bit.
Yes. Okay, the next is a self-portrait of you.
Yes.
So what does this reveal about how you saw yourself?
The one to the... Well, there is one to the right where I'm dressed in black.
Yes.
That's 43.
Beautiful.
When I wanted to mean by that we were all in like after a death, because it was mourning from the death of France. Yes. And then the one in 46, that's more cheerful because that's after the liberation of Paris, etc. That's the one that's
that's in 1946.
But this is rather crucial because you've stopped painting after doing this for 3 years, didn't you? And you were pregnant.
Well, yes. Well, when when I was still having my own personal studio, I painted all the time. But when I started to live with Pablo, I knew him well enough to know that I should take as little room as I could, and certainly not when you paint, you leave canvas behind you. If I made drawings, you can put that in a portfolio. It doesn't have so much volume. But painting, so I decided I should not paint. I should make all my work on paper and consider it like it's like working in a lab when you do, the thing.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
So then that's the next.
So so 46, you see that.
This is a wall of drawings by you.
Yes. So the top one is a portrait of Pablo I did in 45 from memory. The one to the lower left, the title is Adam obliging Eve to eat the apple, so you can understand what it means. And then there is one to the lower right, which is "Don't touch me."
Yes, stop.
So there are restrictions of all kinds.
All right, there's one last here. This is the telephone call. This is 1952.
Yes.
And obviously, tell us about this.
And I believe, for example, in either taking anti-poetic subject matter or also modern objects. I thought it was a part of to be modern was to pen something modern that didn't exist in the 19th century. So I thought the telephone was a good idea. So I did that one with the telephone and my 2 children, because the children always came to listen, always want to know who's on the phone, etc. I did another one which is fairly large, where I am alone and I am holding the book of the telephone, because at that time, on the telephone book, you wrote the 3 letters of like Babylon, B-A-B, and then I wanted to write invalid, I-N-V, and the number. No need of explanation. So that was all my little, can say, British sense of humor.
Yes, why not?
Oh. In the end, what influence did Pablo have on you?
Oh, I think it's enormous, because, first of all, I think it was the most important passion in my whole life, with all the good and the bad. I never loved somebody like that, ever since or before, which doesn't mean I was alone. I seldom was alone, but it was, like this or like that. But there it was without limit. I mean, it was... a passion. What can I say? It was a passion, I think, on both sides.
I was going to say, what influence did you have on him?
I don't know.
I think there was enormous influence, because you just have to look back a bit. I mean, his marriage to Olga had come to a disastrous end.
This is his first wife?
This is the Russian ballerina wife who went more or less mad and was the rest of her life, they separated, they never divorced. And then in the background had always been Marie-Thérèse, who was a sweet, nice girl, but, she wasn't sophisticated or educated or anything, or up to his intellectual standards. And so she was always rather left in a corner. She was faithful. He was, in some respects, I mean, he always looked after her. But then the next one was Dora Maar, who was surrealist, one of the surrealist girls, who had been... she'd been the mistress of various surrealist monsters who had sort of really taught her all about depravity and everything else. So she was a fine... when Picasso, first of all, picked her up, he'd seen her in the Café Flore, and she had some black gloves on, and she was using a knife and trying to stab the table between her fingers, and sometimes missing. And he found this so weird, watching her do this in the Café Flore. She was very masochistic. She was partly Yugoslav and partly French. And I knew her well and was extremely fond of her, but she was very neurotic, and she was more or less destroyed by Picasso. And then she went to a psychiatrist and sort of ultimately recovered and became a religious maniac. Yeah. But that was a dramatic... So Françoise comes along, who's the first sort of rational, well-educated, extremely bright, Françoise comes along, and she was a whole new phase in Picasso's life, in that she was so intelligent and sensitive and so well educated. And so his life was transformed, and the result is this fantastic group of works.
10 years of
10 years of
a dialogue between them.
And a dialogue between them. And I think it's one of the great phases of his life. And I think Françoise was very, very, very responsible for that.
How do you feel when you walk through this gallery and see all of this together?
Well, it was extremely moving for me, because first of all, I saw most of those paintings or sculptures being done, but there they are together. There is a good group of them, so for me it was really a very deep emotion to see them together.
It's so great to have you here.
Yeah.
Now, where is, I asked you this beforehand, but where is the next volume? Are you prepared to put pen to paper soon?
I'm starting work tomorrow. I mean, now the show's all right. So on,
You've been distracted by all these galleries.
By all these things.
By Gagosian.
Now I go back to work on the book.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you. It's great to see you. It reminds me of the wonderful time we had so many times in Paris, but also in putting together the last conversation we had with you.
Thank you.
There is a spirit, isn't it, that you see that's just wonderful.
Well, it's astonishing and heartwarming.
And your talent here is so self-evident. Thank you. Thank you both. A remarkable exhibition that you can see. It's at the Gagosian Gallery on Madison Avenue, New York. It runs until June 30th, 2012. June 30th, 2012. You do not want to miss it, as you can see. A sense of what went into these paintings and the times that they reflect and the people and the passion of the people that they reflect. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.